Got promoted to partner at her law firm on a Thursday. By Friday evening, my son had made reservations at Meridian, the kind of place where the cheapest entree costs $40 and you need a jacket just to walk through the door. He called his sister in Phoenix, his college roommate and his wife, even his boss, and the boss's husband. 14 people around a long table in a private dining room, I was told later. Champagne. A custom cake with her name written in gold. I found out about the dinner because my granddaughter, Lily, mentioned it while I was braiding her hair that afternoon. "Daddy said we're going somewhere fancy tonight," she said. "I get to wear my purple dress." I kept braiding. "That sounds nice, sweetheart." Nobody said a word to me. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not even a "we'll bring you back something, Mom." At 6:30, I watched them file out the front door. Lily in her purple dress, my son in a blazer I hadn't seen before, my daughter-in-law in a black wrap dress that still had the dry cleaning tag on the inside, which she hadn't noticed. I almost told her. I didn't. The door closed. I stood in that hallway for a long moment. Then I walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and looked at the leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. At 9:14, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from my daughter-in-law. "There's still some of that pasta in the fridge. Don't let it go to waste." I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the table, and I sat very still for a while. I want to tell you that I got angry right away. That would make a cleaner story. But the truth is, the first thing I felt was something quieter than anger. It was recognition. Like finally seeing clearly something that had been blurry for a long time. I pitched my phone back up and typed one word, "Okay." Then I went to my bedroom, pulled my rolling suitcase out from under the bed, and started packing. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My name is June, not the name in any story you've heard before, just a plain name my mother gave me because I was born in the summer and she was a practical woman. I'm 67 years old. I taught 4th grade for 31 years at the same elementary school in Columbus, Ohio. I have one son, Owen, who is 41, and I have been a widow for 9 years since my husband Raymond passed from a heart attack on a Tuesday morning while he was tying his shoes. After Raymond died, I kept the house for 3 years. A 4-bedroom colonial on Briarwood Lane with a yard I couldn't keep up with and rooms that echoed. I kept it because I thought I was supposed to. Because selling it felt like a second death. Because every time I stood in the kitchen, I could still see Raymond at the counter, reading the newspaper and drinking his coffee left-handed, the way he always did. But grief is exhausting, and a 4-bedroom house is a lot of square footage for one person. Owen called me in the spring of my 64th year. He and his wife Vanessa were looking to buy something bigger. They had Lily, who was 6 at the time, and Vanessa was talking about a second child. They'd found a place in Worthington, a neighborhood I knew, a good school district, a house with a finished basement and a big backyard. "Mom," Owen said, "we want you to be part of this. Sell the house, move in with us. You'd have your own suite on the main floor. Lily would grow up with her grandmother under the same roof. And honestly, we could use your help. We could use your help. We could use your help." I noted that even then. But I loved my son and I loved Lily, and the house on Briarwood Lane had stopped feeling like home the day Raymond didn't come back to it. So I said yes. I sold the Briarwood house for $218,000. It had been paid off for 12 years. The money was mine free and clear. Owen suggested I contribute to the new house. Not all of it, just a portion, to make the mortgage more manageable and to give me real ownership in the home. His words, real ownership. I gave them $140,000. I have a clear memory of sitting at the kitchen table with Owen and the title company paperwork, asking him once, just once, about my name on the deed. He waved his hand in that way he has, the way that means he thinks you're overcomplicating something simple. "Mom, the house is for all of us. You don't need to be on the deed for it to be yours. We're family." I believed him because he was my son, and because I had known him since he was 3 days old and I had never had a reason not to believe him. I signed the check. I moved my things into the main floor suite. I told myself this was a new chapter. The new chapter lasted about 4 months before I understood what it actually was. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you. It never does. It happens the way water finds cracks in concrete. Slowly, consistently. until one day the crack is a fracture and the fracture is a collapse. It started with small things. Vanessa reorganized the kitchen without asking me, moved things I've been reaching for in the same place for 30 years, and when I mentioned it, she smiled and said she had a system. I adapted to her system. Then she signed Lily up for a Saturday morning art class and asked if I could drive her, which became every Saturday, then Saturday and Wednesday, then a standing assumption that I was available for anything involving Lily's schedule, because this was never said out loud. Never. But it was always understood. I wasn't working anymore, so what else did I have to do? I had things to do. I had a book club, a water bikes class on Tuesday mornings, a standing lunch date with my friend Gloria from the school, a garden I was trying to establish in the small side yard. But those things began to rearrange themselves around the family's needs, and then they disappeared one by one, like candles being blown out. By the second year, I was cooking dinner 4 nights a week. Not because anyone asked. It just evolved, the way these things do, until it was simply expected. On the nights I didn't cook, Vanessa would sigh while looking at takeout menus and say something like, "It's so hard to find anything healthy." I'd take the hint and start something on the stove. I want to be fair. I don't think Vanessa set out to do this deliberately. I think she is a woman who is very good at getting what she wants in ways that allow her to never quite ask for it. She's excellent at her job. She made partner after all. She knows how to structure a situation so that the conclusion seems obvious and inevitable. I think she structured her household the same way, without ever sitting down and deciding to. Owen, for his part, floated through it all. He worked long hours, came home tired, and preferred not to notice tension. When things were smooth, he was cheerful. When I tried once, in the second year, to tell him I felt like I was losing myself in that house, he got a look on his face that I can only describe as pained inconvenience, and said, "Mom, Vanessa works really hard. We all just have to pitch in my own home that I had paid $140,000 to live in." I didn't say that. I just nodded and went back to my room. By the third year, I had a system of my own. Not the kind Vanessa had for the kitchen. Mine was internal. I paid attention. I watched. I noticed things and I stored them away, not out of resentment, but out of something closer to self-preservation. I started keeping my important documents in my room, in a fireproof box I bought at the Staples on Henderson Road. And in that box, along with my passport and my Raymond's death certificate and my retirement account statements, I put something else. I had gone back to a storage unit I rented, the one I'd kept after moving out of Briarwood, mostly for furniture I wasn't ready to part with, and I'd gone through Raymond's old filing cabinet. I was looking for his watch, which I'd promised Lily she could have when she was older. I found the watch, and tucked behind it in a manila envelope labeled in Raymond's handwriting, "House paperwork, original." I found something I had forgotten existed. When Raymond and I first bought the Briarwood house in 1989, there had been some kind of clerical issue with the title that the lawyer had flagged. It was resolved eventually, but in the process, we had ended up with an additional document, a rider attached to the original title, acknowledging my individual ownership stake as a co-purchaser. It was old, it was legal, and my name was on it, clear as anything, alongside a notarization from a Columbus attorney who had retired sometime in the late 90s. Now, the Briarwood house had been sold. This document did not pertain to the Worthington house in any direct way. I want to be clear about that. I am not telling you I had some secret legal claim that appeared out of nowhere. What I had was something different. I had proof of a pattern. I had records. I had 30 years of financial paperwork showing that I was a woman who knew how to manage money, who had assets, who was not dependent on anyone's goodwill to survive, and I had, over those 3 years in Worthington, been quietly doing something that nobody in that household knew about. When I sold the Briarwood house, I had given Owen $140,000, but the sale price was $218,000. The remaining $78,000 after taxes and fees, I had placed in a separate account, a high-yield savings account at a credit union I'd been a member of since 1979, one that nobody in my son's household had any connection to. And over 3 years, with my teacher's pension coming in every month and very little to spend it on inside that house, that account had grown. I had not planned any of this as a strategy. I want to say that plainly. I had simply learned, after 31 years of teaching and 9 years of widowhood, that a woman of my age and my particular circumstances should always have something that belongs only to her. Raymond had taught me that, actually. He used to say, "June, always keep a garden of your own, even if you live in a forest." He meant it literally. He was an avid gardener, but I understood the metaphor. That night, after the text about the pasta, I packed my suitcase in exactly the way you pack when you have thought about packing before, which I had, more than once in the preceding months. I took my clothes. I took my documents from the fireproof box. I took the photograph of Raymond and me at Niagara Falls, 1987, and the one of Lily as a newborn, both of which I kept on my nightstand. I took my medications, my reading glasses, my phone charger. I left everything else. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Not angry, not long, just this: "I've gone to stay somewhere quieter. Please don't worry about the pasta. I won't be back for the leftovers. Mom." I had already called Gloria that afternoon, before the text even arrived, because I think some part of me knew. Gloria had a guest room she'd been offering for 2 years. I drove to her house in Clintonville at 10:30 on a Friday night, and she had chamomile tea waiting, and she didn't ask me to explain right away. She just put the tea in front of me and sat down and said, "Okay, you're here." That's the first thing. That's why 40 years of friendship is worth more than anything money can buy. Owen called at 6:50 the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 7:12. Then Vanessa called, which surprised me genuinely because Vanessa did not, as a rule, call me directly. She called at 7:28 and I watched her name on the screen until it stopped. I listened to Owen's voicemails while Gloria made scrambled eggs. His first one was worried. His second one was confused. He said he didn't understand what my note meant. He said he hoped I was okay. He said Lily was asking where I was. That one landed. I won't pretend otherwise. Lily asking where I was. I sat with that for a moment. Then I set the phone down and ate my eggs. I texted Owen at 8:15. "I'm safe. I'm with Gloria. I need some time. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." He responded immediately. "Mom, what's going on? Did something happen? Please talk to me." I put the phone in my purse and went for a walk around Gloria's neighborhood. It was early April and the redbuds were blooming. That particular pink-purple that only lasts about 2 weeks, and then it's gone. I walked for 45 minutes and I let myself feel everything. The hurt, the tiredness, the strange lightness that comes when you finally stop pretending something is fine when it isn't. I cried a little, walking past someone's yard full of daffodils. Not from sadness exactly, more from relief. When I got back to Gloria's, I called my attorney. Her name is Paulette, and she had handled Raymond's estate and the Briarwood sale, and she was the kind of woman who picked up the phone on a Saturday morning because she knew if she didn't, you'd find someone else. I told her the situation. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I valued most about her. "The $140,000, she said when I finished. "Do you have documentation of the transfer?" I did. I had the bank statements, the wire transfer receipt, the email from Owen where he had laid out the arrangement. I had kept all of it in the fireproof box. "Good," Paulette said. "Now, what do you want?" That question. I had been waiting for someone to ask me that question for a long time. I told her. 2 weeks later, I met Owen for coffee at a place on High Street that we used to go to when he was at Ohio State, back when he was 20 and I was bringing him care packages, and we still talked easily about everything. He was already there when I arrived, and he looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. He stood up when he saw me, and I could see relief cross his face, and also something that might have been shame, which I noted. We sat down. I ordered a plain coffee, black. He ordered something with oat milk that took the barista a while to make. "Mom," he said, "I owe you an apology?" "Yes," I said, "you do." He looked startled. I think he had expected me to say something softer. I used to say softer things. I had spent 3 years saying softer things. "I didn't realize how much we were putting on you," he said. "I should have seen it. Vanessa and I talked, and she acknowledges that she could have done things differently. She wants to apologize to you in person." "She can," I said. "That's a separate conversation. Right now I'm talking to you, Owen." He nodded. "I gave you $140,000, I said. I asked about my name on the deed. You told me I didn't need to worry about it because we were family. He looked at the table. I know. I want that remedied. Paulette has drawn up a document. It's not a lien, it's not a claim on the property in a hostile sense. It's a formal acknowledgement of my financial contribution, structured as a loan agreement with a repayment schedule. 10 years. No interest, because you're my son. But it needs to be signed, and it needs to be recorded. He looked up. Mom, I'm not finished, I said, which I don't think I had ever said to him before in his adult life. He closed his mouth. Second, if I come back to that house, and I'm not saying I will, I'm still deciding. The arrangement has to be different, in writing. What I contribute to the household, what is expected of me, what my time is worth, and what is not my responsibility. Lily is my granddaughter and I love her and I will be part of her life, but I am not a built-in babysitter or a housekeeper, and that has to be explicit. Of course, he said. He said it quickly and I held up one finger. I'm not asking for your agreement right now. I'm asking you to take this home, read it with Vanessa, sit with it for a week, and come back to me. If you both agree to it, we move forward. If you don't, that's also an answer, and I'll plan accordingly. He looked at me for a long moment. My son, who had been small enough to carry once, who had cried his first day of kindergarten, who had called me from college when his first girlfriend broke up with him, I could see all those versions of him at the table across from me, and I loved them all deeply. And I also knew that love alone was not enough to make a situation healthy. What happened to you, Mom? He said, and his voice was soft. Nothing happened to me, I said. I woke up, is all. Lily called me that same evening from what I could tell was the upstairs bathroom, speaking in a loud whisper, which is how 9-year-olds believe they're being secretive. She said she missed me, and she didn't understand why I had left, and could I please come watch her soccer game on Saturday? I'll be there, I said. I'll be on the sideline, and I'll bring your favorite snack. White cheddar popcorn, she said immediately. White cheddar popcorn, she said immediately. White cheddar popcorn, I confirmed. There was a pause, and then she said in a smaller voice, Grandma, is everything going to be okay? I looked out Gloria's guest room window at the redbud tree in the backyard, which was still holding its blooms in the evening light. Yes, sweetheart, I said. I think it is. And I meant it, not because everything was resolved. It wasn't, not yet. Owen and Vanessa would need their week, and Paulette would need her signatures, and there was still the question of where I was going to live and what that would look like and how the three of us were going to build something different out of what had cracked. But I meant it because I understood something I'd forgotten somewhere in those 3 years of making dinners and driving to art classes and shrinking myself to fit into spaces that kept getting smaller. I had resources, I had Paulette, I had Gloria and her chamomile tea. I had a savings account in my own name with enough money in it to rent a very nice apartment in Columbus for as long as I needed to. I had a pension that was mine. I had 31 years of knowing how to manage a room full of people who were not always grateful and did not always listen and sometimes needed a firm hand more than a gentle one. I had never needed saving. I had needed simply to remember that. Owen called 4 days later. He had read the document. Vanessa had read it. They wanted to meet with Paulette together and sign it. I also want you to know something, Owen said, and I don't expect this to fix anything. I just want to say it. That text she sent you, the one about the pasta? I didn't know about it until after. When she told me, I told her it was wrong. It was dismissive and it was unkind, and you deserved better than that. You have always deserved better than that. I was quiet for a moment. Thank you for saying so, I said. Are you coming home? I thought about it. The word home and what it meant, and whether a place could earn that word back after losing it. Not yet, I said, but we're getting there. I did not move back into the Worthington house. Not right away. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in the short north, which is a neighborhood I had always loved and never let myself live in because it seemed impractical, and I discovered that impractical is a word that belongs to a different season of life than the one I was in. The apartment had tall windows and wood floors and a small balcony where I put a container garden, tomatoes, herbs, one optimistic pepper plant that bore exactly 3 peppers and made me proud anyway. I was 20 minutes from Lily. I saw her twice a week and on most weekends, and I went to every soccer game, and I was there for the school play where she played a talking tree and delivered her single line with tremendous gravitas. I had dinners with Owen, and slower, more careful conversations than we used to have, and they were better for the care. Vanessa apologized to me in person, at a restaurant of her choosing. It was a good apology, specific, not defensive, without qualifications. I believed it was genuine. I don't know that she and I will ever be easy with each other, the way some mothers and daughters-in-law are easy. But easy was never the thing I needed from her. What I needed was respect, and now that was something we had an explicit agreement about, written down and signed. The loan repayment started in May. Every month on the 15th, Owen transferred a payment to my account. It wasn't about the money. My pension and my savings were more than sufficient. It was about acknowledgement, about the record being set right, about not being the kind of woman who lets $140,000 and 3 years of her life vanish into a house where her name was not on the door. Gloria says I am the most stubborn person she has ever met, and she says it the way people say things that are meant to sound like criticism but are actually the opposite. I told her I prefer the word deliberate. Lily asked me once, this past summer, why I moved out instead of just talking to her parents about it. I thought about how to explain it to a 9-year-old. Sometimes, I said, you have to show people something is serious, not just say it. She chewed on that for a while. Like when you take away a privilege instead of just saying no TV, she said. Exactly like that, I said. She nodded, satisfied with the answer. We were sitting on my balcony eating white cheddar popcorn, and the evening was warm, and somewhere below us, someone was playing music from a window. Something I didn't recognize but liked. The most important thing I learned in all of this is not something I would have predicted. It was not about standing up for myself, though I did. It was not about the money, though the money mattered. It was about the difference between being needed and being valued, and how easy it is to mistake one for the other when you love someone and you want to believe the best. I was needed in that house, every day in every room, in ways that nobody named and nobody thanked me for. That kind of need will consume you. It will make you invisible in the most thorough way possible by making you indispensable. What I wanted, what I should have insisted on from the beginning, was to be valued, to be seen, to sit at the table that was bought partly with my money in the house I helped make possible and be included not as staff but as family. I have that now. It took a text about leftover pasta and a suitcase and a drive across the city at 10:30 at night. It took Paulette and Gloria and 45 minutes walking past blooming redbuds in early April, but I have it. And if you're sitting somewhere right now, in a house where you feel like a ghost, where your name is not on the door, where your needs are last, where you have been shrinking yourself down to fit a shape that was never yours, I want you to know that you do not have to keep doing that. You are not the leftovers. I used to think that staying was the same thing as loving, that if I kept showing up, kept cooking, kept driving, kept shrinking myself into whatever shape the room needed, it meant I was a good mother, a good grandmother, a generous person. It took me 3 years inside that house to understand that staying when the conditions are wrong isn't love. It's just endurance. And endurance without dignity is not something to be proud of. What happened to me in that house happened slowly, the way most important things do. Vanessa didn't wake up one morning and decide to treat me like staff. Owen didn't sit down and choose to look away. It accumulated, small concession after small concession, each one reasonable in isolation, until the whole picture was something neither of us would have agreed to at the start. That's how these situations survive. They build in the space between what is said and what is understood. But here's what I know now. Looking back at the woman who stood in that hallway after they all walked out the door, she had more than she realized. That's the part that stayed with me longest. I had Paulette, I had the savings account, I had the records, the receipts, the paper trail of 31 years of a woman who had always, quietly, kept her own garden. I hadn't been passive. I had been paying attention in ways I didn't even fully recognize as preparation at the time. When the moment came, I was ready. Not because I had planned a strategy, but because I had never stopped thinking clearly, even when I was hurting. There is something in that worth naming. The clearest heads are not always the loudest ones. I did not rage. I did not issue ultimatums in the middle of a fight. I packed my suitcase, wrote a short note, and drove across the city to a friend who had chamomile tea waiting. That restraint, the choice to act from a place of clarity rather than wound, was the only thing that made everything that followed possible. If I had confronted Vanessa that night, I would have been emotional and she would have been defensive and Owen would have stood in the middle trying to keep the peace, and nothing would have changed. Instead, I created space. Space has a way of making things visible that closeness obscures. The loan agreement is almost halfway repaid now. Not because I needed the money, I didn't, not really, but because it was the right thing. Wrongs that are named can be corrected. Wrongs that are swallowed just become part of the body. I didn't want to carry that anymore. I wanted it on paper, fixed, settled. That's not bitterness, that's just knowing what things are worth. And Lily, that child, whispering from her upstairs bathroom, asking if everything was going to be okay. I think about that more than anything else. What I showed her by leaving and by coming back on different terms is something I hope she keeps. I hope she remembers that her grandmother was a woman who could be pushed to her limit and still respond with a clear head and a straight spine. That the way you leave a bad situation matters as much as the fact of leaving. That you can love someone completely and still refuse to disappear for them. I am not the leftovers. I never was. I just forgot that for a while. And forgetting, it turns out, is not permanent as long as you're willing to remember.